All right, good morning, everyone. This is the April 12th blockchain meeting of 2021. Recording is now beginning. Let's go ahead and just quickly do a mainnet check-in. For those of you who've been watching the last week of releases, we changed the versioning scheme recently to use something that's kind of like a super semantic version. The version fields are documented in the README file, but basically there are 5 fields. The first 2 are basically never going to change. Version 2 of the architecture is the first version field. The network version, in terms of like how many hard forks there have been, is the second field. So right now we're in 2.0. And the next 3 digits are much more like the semantic version. So the third version changes whenever we change the chain state version. So if you see that increment, you'll have to start a node from scratch as opposed to using your existing chain state. The second field is non-chain state breakage. So any sorts of changes that are adding new functionality or changing behavior but don't require you to spin up a new version. And the final version is the hotfix version. So this past week we issued the 2.0.10.0.1 hotfix, which plugged a security vulnerability in the node that could lead to a denial of service on public-facing nodes. If you're not running this now, you should. And it looks like we're still on track, and correct me if I'm wrong, people at Hero, we're upgrading to 2.0.11 this Tuesday, right? We're on RC3.
I think we need to tag an RC4 first and then deploy it, at least on some of our nodes, before we can actually sort of tag a release build. Oh, RC4 is tagged? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Then we should at least deploy it to the testnet nodes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so assuming we can get RC4 deployed on the testnet today, and everything else is looking good. We've kind of been testing RC3 for the past week anyway, so I think that should put us in a good spot to kind of roll it out tomorrow.
Yeah, I could push that to testnet today.
All right.
Sounds good. Moving on to the project board real quick. All right, I think this is actually finished. I'll go ahead and close this. Review in progress. Reed, I see that you sent a draft PR for the stacks, moving the stacks codec, message codec into its own module. Is this ready for review? I see it's still in draft status.
Yeah, so after putting this draft up, I had a few conversations with Aaron just about the strategy for this refactor. And I think actually, I still feel like this is something that we might want to do. But I'm not sure if the ordering makes sense compared to or versus some of the other changes I'm making with regards to splitting up VM into kind of like a separate library module. So I would hold off on this for now. I think I need to think about this a bit further, and I think yeah, I need to reconcile this with some of the other changes I'm making, I guess. But yeah, I would hold off.
Okay, sounds good. I'm taking a look at Pavithra's PR here. Do you want to just comment on it briefly, Pavithra?
Yeah, so basically, I tried using the next version of Bitcoin D, and it caused some tests to fail in the integration. So I just updated some of the logic to make sure that it would start working. So that just involves creating a wallet explicitly. So I think I addressed Jude's comments, so I think it's ready for another round of review now.
Okay. To be clear, this is just for testing, right? Like if we run this publicly, you won't be able to ask a Bitcoin node to create a wallet necessarily.
Well, basically it just mimics the old behavior of Bitcoin, where Bitcoin D, where it just it would just create a wallet with empty string, just automatically. So it shouldn't change any existing behavior, because that's just what it would do every time.
Okay. Yeah, we'll look forward to testing this against a public node then.
Which version of Bitcoin was this, Pavitra?
So the new version is 0.21.0. And I I linked what's it called, the actual diff in the issue. So like you can see like the diff from the Bitcoin repo that caused this change.
Got it. Thank you.
Cool. I see this is still in draft, Pavitra. Do you want to just comment on the status of adding the new event for new microblocks?
Yeah, basically it's pretty much done. I moved it back into draft because I was talking to Matt and basically I just had to number the transactions differently so that it could be like a bit more useful, like the actual index. So I'm doing that and I should be able to send that out today. And then I can move it out of draft. And then I'll be ready for review. So
Awesome. Sounds good. Is Pascal on the call? All right, I guess not. Anyway, the status of 1641 is that we're just waiting until 2.0.11 is out the door. I believe that's also the case for a fixed mempool walk order. But Pavitra, is this otherwise ready to go for reviews?
yeah, Aaron like re-reviewed it on Friday and I responded to his comments. So yeah, it should be pretty much done now.
Awesome. I'll take a look at that today. See if we can get that approved. 1805, I'm just going to put this in the backlog, I guess, because we're probably going to end up fixing it as part of the 2.1 release. And Reed, is there any future work on decoupling the Clarity VM that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I'm still working on this pretty actively. At the moment, what I'm trying to do is basically split the VM into two modules. One of them is kind of more Stacks blockchain specific, kind of like a library for using the Clarity VM. And then the other is like the more kind of general Clarity VM that hopefully we can kind of like package as its own crate. And yeah, I've made a bit of progress on this, but there's still, I think, a decent amount of work to be done. I'm hoping to, hoping to try and finish this week is my current goal. But it's been a little bit hard for me to kind of like get a clear sense of exactly how much is involved, just because like it's like one of these tasks that tends to kind of like spiral a little bit as you keep digging through the but anyway, the strategy has shifted a bit from like trying to hoist dependencies out of chain state into kind of like an upper level types module, which I don't like. There's going to be a little bit of that, but I don't think that's like quite as necessary as like I was thinking originally with like the codec refactor. Although I think the codec thing is still something we want to do. But anyway, yeah, I'm still working on this.
Is there anything that you need from us, like to make it go faster, to help de-risk the refactoring?
I've been having some very helpful conversations with Aaron. Aaron's been super helpful. So I assume I'll have a lot more questions that I'll continue to ask Aaron. So yeah, I don't think so. But also, I guess just maybe if we could continue not to, if it's possible to hold off on kind of making kind of big changes in the VM this week, that would also be helpful.
Alrighty, sounds good. So that what's the push? I know we talked about having this moratorium on changing the VM. Right now, that was supposed to expire on the 15th, but I guess we'll just hold that off for the whole week. Yeah,
I think if we could go to Friday, like I feel pretty good about being able to get most of this done by then. I apologize for just the uncertainty around this and the difficulty around kind of refactoring in this way, but I don't really know of a better way to do it.
That's nothing to apologize for. Like, it's something that has to be done, and it's like ripping a Band-Aid off. Like this. Yeah. As long as it's off, and like as long as we're all making progress, everything should be fine. Cool. And the sooner we do it, the happier we're all going to be. Yeah, for sure. Anyway, trying to get this. Sorry, what?
Oh, I was just going to say, Reed, if you're asking Aaron questions in a DM, I would say maybe just move that conversation to the Stacks Core Devs channel. That way other people can also benefit from that discussion and maybe also be able to participate.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, just like a little bit more context. The latest conversations we've been having have been around just like Clarity backing store, depending on like types from chain state and like how to deal with that, as it's something that's used in the analysis part of the VM, which ideally shouldn't depend on chain state. But yeah, I'll move those conversations into the public Discord.
Cool, cool. Let's go ahead and look at the new issues, and then we'll take a look at the backlog real quick. So this guy is just reporting one line of his node not responding, his Bitcoin node not responding. Not much else we can say to this, just you can't reach your Bitcoin node. Oh well, if he doesn't respond by the end of the week, I'll go ahead and close it. Node crash against testnet after loading Genesis data. DeWalker, was this the SIG ill you were getting?
Oh no. This is from.
Oh, this is the integrator. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've already been back and forth on this a few times. Is there any progress on this?
No, I think Aaron maybe had mentioned that, you know, the stack trace coming from slog might indicate some sort of resource exhaustion. I reached out to the vendor to see if they could reproduce it reliably if they turn. So it only happens if they turn on debug logs. If they don't turn on debug logs, it doesn't happen. I've gotten sort of the output of like ulimit-a in their environment to see if they're running out of file descriptors and so on. Nothing kind of obvious looks off, but our DevOps team is going to meet with the this integrator probably later today or tomorrow, and so we can follow up with them, see if there's any other update. So maybe Charlie, you can update this issue if you learn anything new.
Sure, I could do that.
Sounds good. I think we talked about this. Yeah, this is 8 days ago, last week, about the prices for index of being a little too high. And I guess the answer there is we'd have to wait till 2.1 or try to execute a cost vote, and there's not much else we can do. Couple of backlog things. I think these 3 Atlas issues can be closed now. I've been testing Atlas myself, and all of the issues are no longer manifesting at all in the Atlas module. So is that all right with you, Ludo? Can I go and close these?
Yeah, that's like really perfect faith.
Cool. Let's see, sorry, this thing's a little slow for me. Oops. Oh, come on. Close. Alrighty. So that's running through the board. I shared a doc with you all earlier this morning. Sorry, one sec. Zoom's being stupid right now. Let me just move this out of the way. Called the work streams document. If you haven't received a link, just let me know on Discord and I'll go ahead and share it with you. But I was hoping we can maybe spend some time today just going through the various work streams for getting 2.1 out the door. I wrote down some estimated difficulty using t-shirt sizes, and I have a column for notes, and I'm hoping we can get some clarity on whether or not these sizes are appropriate, what kinds of caveats exist still, unknown unknowns, and who wants to start taking the lead on the various work stream items. Does that sound good?
Yeah, and thanks for putting together this doc, Jude. I think that's exactly what I was trying to work on myself. So I'm glad you have a head start.
Awesome, cool. So there's basically 4 work streams that I have written in here, and they basically mirror the the ultra mega super Clarity 2.1 thread that's on the StacksGov discussion board here. There's stacking improvements. There's in-band upgrades, there's better Clarity APIs, and there's reliability improvements. I think Aaron's document, high priority POX update scoping, basically takes care of most of the stacking improvements work streams and has a more fine-grained breakdown of what needs to be done. So I'll defer to him for determining the estimated difficulty. But I did want to add one thing to this though, and that is it might be worth considering adding native SegWit support for stacking improvements. I put this as a medium difficulty just because I know that we will need to pervasively start treating Bitcoin TXIDs by the WTXID instead. I think that takes into account the SegWit data. And we will need to, and this is perhaps the more tedious part, upgrade the miner to start issuing native SegWit transactions and verify that it works. So that will require not only being able to parse SegWit transactions, but also to synthesize them both in our test environment as well as live in production. So that said, how do you want to do the stacking improvements? Do you want to just use this document here for the high priority POX update scoping?
Yeah, I think that that's probably a good idea. There's also issues created for, I think, all of the stuff in that document.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Yeah, there's no issue for native SegWit.
No, there's not.
But I would say we should treat native SegWit as like one of the lowest priority items for 2.1.
I agree.
It would be nice to have, but it touches a ton of stuff. And I think that the other issues are just like way more painful to people.
I agree. I'll go ahead and add that right now real quick then, just so we have it written down. This is both 2.1 and it is definitely consensus critical. It's not adding. All right, I'm not going to assign anyone an issue here. This issue here, because as you say, it's probably the lowest priority thing of all these. That said, do you want us to try to assign these right now, Aaron? Like, do you want to assign yourself, or does anyone want to volunteer?
So I would propose, instead of assigning specific issues right now, maybe we can go to the work stream stock. And I would say, ideally, like maybe for each item in the row here, we should maybe put down one or ideally like two names of people who are both interested and have sufficient context to work on these things. That way we have some redundancy, some shared context, people can work in tandem, and we're not kind of, creating more silos. So yeah, and maybe people can self-assign for now if they're particularly interested in something as we go down this list here.
Yeah, does anyone want to just take like 30 seconds and just write themselves down as volunteers for various work streams?
Yeah, let's do that. And I would say, don't feel like anyone has like exclusive ownership over one work stream or the other. Right now, I think the goal is to get maybe more realistic coverage, and then we can sort out the actual assignments as we get closer to doing the work.
What's up?
So I think like looking at this document, one of the tricky things is that a ton of this work kind of depends on the existence of this like epoch switching behavior.
That's right.
And that's listed nowhere in this document.
Oh, I thought that was the soft fork kit.
It's not a soft fork.
No, but the mechanism's the same though. Being able to track what feature sets are active based on the Bitcoin block time.
Yeah, but that doesn't like, I don't think that like encompasses the actual implementation, which I think is the scariest part. Like the actual implementation of like injecting a ton of state into the chain state and changing the behavior of the VM. Yeah, I would say that's sort of the terrifying thing. And basically like all of the better Clarity APIs depend on that. The stacking improvements depend on that.
That's true. Has everyone had a chance to write down their name somewhere?
I don't see Pavitra's name anywhere. Pavitra, I'm assuming that's intentional on your part. I'm happy to follow up with you separately, but feel free to put down your name for the things that you feel like you want to take a crack at.
Okay, I was gonna go through it like after the meeting.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Yep, that's all good. I guess the next step then would be if you wrote your name down on one of these work streams, just feel free to take some time today and add some issues and tag them as Stacks 2.1 to try to characterize the various work items that would have to happen as part of the work stream that you're assigning yourself to here. But that said, let's just quickly go through the estimated difficulties and make sure we're on the same page here. I know I wrote down for the first 3 items here that according to the high priority POX update scoping, these first 3 streams will take about 30 work days. Does that sound right, Aaron?
Yeah, that sounds right.
All right, and I'm assuming that this is a nice to have, the SegWit.
Yeah, I would call it a nice to have, and that anything that's a nice to have, like we shouldn't even.
Don't even touch it.
We shouldn't even be planning.
Yeah. I suspect that there is things that are must have that you will struggle to get to. So
yes, yeah, like if implementing that means we lose 2 weeks of testing, I would say that that's a terrible outcome.
I agree, and that's a risk for SegWit support.
Yeah.
For in-band upgrades, do you want to just quickly talk through the epoch switch tracking? I put large down here. But when you say like state injection into the chain state, Aaron, what did you mean by that earlier?
So when we cross this whatever threshold where these 2.1 changes take effect, like all sorts of things are going to start behaving differently. So like if we have these native functions implemented as an extension contract or something like that, like at that point we need some kind of behavior in the VM that does like the rerouting of function calls. And that's true for the extension contracts for the new Clarity natives. And it's also true for like the POX contract itself. And Yeah, so that's kind of the thing that I'm talking about, which is like basically the VM aware switch. Yeah, and like it's not even instrumenting the extension contracts. It's like instrumenting contract call.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't think there are that many call sites for contract call. I think it's really just inside of contexts and maybe special, right?
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that there's an extent to which it's like been factored out, because like we do something similar today already for the
Right.
POX lockups. It's just, you know, this is a pretty invasive thing that's happening. So
I agree. But thankfully, though, I don't think the logic for this is particularly challenging. I think it's just as long as the VM can see the sortition DB and say, like, if sortition height, you know, less than epoch 2.1, then do this, else do this other thing.
yeah, there's some confounding situations like app blocks.
Yes. Can you think of some other ones?
Potentially forks.
What's up?
Potentially, yeah, I would say that like if there was a POX fork or something like that, we should be like testing its behavior under a number of forking and reorg scenarios.
Well, wait now. Isn't it the case that we're just looking at the Bitcoin block height, so the POX fork shouldn't matter? Like we always
Yes,
know what the
but
sorry, go ahead.
right, but the test scenario is when you're executing like a second time basically through. So like you're executing under a reorg, so you're going backwards in the sortition DB. So if there's any sort of like cached data that the VM is keeping around, then that would create problems.
That's true. I think we already keep track of some sort of binding between the stacks block in the VM and the burn chain block, or at least we could add that binding, and that could in turn tell us what the height is.
Yeah, I think that that's true. Like these are all things that can be dealt with. It's just, yeah, it's coverage we need.
Yeah, that's true.
I need to hop off for a conflicting meeting. So I just wanted to mention one thing and apologize if this is a digression from the current discussion. But in this list, I don't see kind of the actual mechanism for doing the upgrade itself, in terms of existing state that we have on chain right now. Are there like new upgrade mechanisms that we need to develop in order to do the 2.0 to 2.1 upgrade? And kind of related to that, I think we'll also want to think about just how to time the upgrade to minimize, or for example, like what the implications might be for a prepare phase or people who have locked up their stacks tokens while the upgrade happens. So just kind of thinking through some of those issues. I don't know if we need a separate work stream for that or if they're subsumed by some of the existing items, but just wanted to call that out before I hop off here.
No, I think that's a good point, Walker. I think that should be its own work stream. It's better to have over communicate and have some redundancy here than not have enough, I think. I should have that right here as insert new state as part of the epoch upgrade. This includes the obviously the extension contracts, the POX changes. We have to copy overall state from the old POX contract to the new POX contract. But I don't think lockups change at all in any of this. Do we also want to consider like time this for a something that's not going to happen in the prepare phase?
I mean, I guess we could see where block 700,000 is actually going to land, and then see, you know, if it happens to end, like land automatically in a prepare phase, or we want to shift the time.
I mean, I think it's going to be risky no matter what we do, but I mean, I
That's
think
true.
it's something we just, yeah.
I would actually maybe say maybe Epoch Upgrade captures that, but I think a work stream for just laying out what the upgrade process would look like, just like we did for, you know, the 1.0 to 2.0 transition, where, you know, we kind of laid out some timelines and some time windows where this is what people can expect would happen on the current Stacks 2.0 chain. And we can maybe tackle that a little bit later. Anyways, I have to hop off. Thanks again, Jude, for starting this doc. And I'll kind of go through it afterwards and put my questions for async discussion.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Insofar as executing the insert new state, I think it's a matter of maybe it's something that can happen as part of the Stacks chain, the Stacks chain state advancing past Bitcoin block 700,000. Kind of like how we do with a boot block. I guess like the risk here is like what happens if there's no sortition then? I think we might have to drive this from the chains coordinator. Like as it's processing burn blocks, if it encounters Bitcoin block 700,000, or if it encounters a Stacks block after Bitcoin block 700,000, that first Stacks block, we have to execute the state migration in. So like if there's a sortition in block 700,000, then we just do it right then and there. If there is a Stacks block that gets mined after 700,000, but it is the first Stacks block in its fork that is after 700,000, then we do the instantiation there as well. Does that all make sense?
I think that this will have to happen, yeah, at every new Stacks block. Like every Stacks block that's the first Stacks block after 700,000 will have to do this.
I agree.
So
yeah, every time you have a parent-child linkage that crosses 700,000, you have to do this.
Yeah.
That's interesting because we would want to make sure then that the time required to execute the insert new state is very fast. Otherwise, this is a DDoS vector. People can just mine blocks that always straddle this boundary, and in doing so, slow the chain down or stall it or cause it to block for 10 minutes or something like that. Scan. Is that something that we should have as a separate workstream item, perhaps?
No, I mean, I think that that's something we have to do after we have an implementation, or test the implementation.
True. Maybe just something to think about then.
Yeah.
Maybe it influences the design of the POX contract somehow. In-band upgrades. I talk about the soft fork kit. I guess this could wait till after 2.1 if we had to, but I think that there are several things. Yeah, actually, maybe we can just take this out because I think that there are several things. Like if we can get the epoch switch logic working, then we don't really need to worry about this. So I'm gonna take this out here. Voting on exit at block height. I think if we can do this, so what this would require be pervasively replacing all uses of exit at block height, the config option. in the Stacks node with access instead to the whatever is tracking votes. Actually, I'm sorry, let's undo this for 1 sec. We will have to have some sort of voting mechanism in place in order to do this. Because what this will let us do then is if we ever have to upgrade the POX contract again, we can at least make it so miners can vote for an exit at block height, at which point the network is basically asking for a hard fork, which I think is, as I've mentioned elsewhere, I think is a far more judicial use of this power. It shouldn't be developers necessarily exclusively calling for hard forks, but the network can make its own decision. And that I think applies similarly to replacing or extending the POX sunset. And I think the work there is basically the same. We need to go make sure that all uses of the hard-coded sunset values are instead loaded from whatever voting mechanism is used to decide what the sunset values should be. I call this the soft fork kit logic. In reality, it's more like a voting kit logic. And there's already an issue open for it. I'm happy to go ahead and start tackling this right away because I think it influences the remainder of the in-band upgrade workstream. Speaking of in-band upgrades, one thing I do have on the 2.1 thread is vote to replace the POX contract. I'm actually in favor of just dropping this because I think it's going to be very difficult to shoehorn this in because of how we're doing the POX contract upgrade. I think it might be sufficient that if we can just get exit at block height voting working, then we don't have to worry about doing some sort of in-band replacement of POX because the network can just vote to stop the current chain and start a new chain at a particular block height with a new POX contract. What do you all think about that?
I'm definitely supportive of doing something like a vote for the next exit at block height. Yeah. So we can drop this item, you think? Vote to replace POX contract is indistinguishable from vote at exit at block height? I would argue that we should absolutely be dropping vote to replace POX contract. Like I would say that we're not at all prepared to implement something like that. All right, it's gone. Yeah. I'm always in favor of dropping work if we can. Yeah, I would say like the XL designation for that is like a lie. Oh, it's too small? Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking that's when I was writing this. I don't think we'd be able to fit it in a t-shirt. It's basically. Okay, that's good to know. Glad we're on the same page. Better clarity APIs. A lot of the work streams here are really just backfilling a bunch of functionality into Clarity through an extension contract that lets us convert between strings, buffers, and ubints, which I've noticed is somewhat painful to do right now. But there's a couple other goodies in here that I think might be worth considering, and that is adding something like take a slice of a buffer, as well as split a buffer into two buffers at a particular index, as well as make a variadic argument version of concat. The intuition here is that if you want to concat several buffers, right now it's quadratic complexity, but there's no reason it has to be. You could do a linear in the total byte length complexity if you're willing to make an n concat, like concat n buffers together. Do these things sound reasonable? Yeah. The only thing I would say is that the variable number of sequences we probably can't do. No? No. Well, we could, but not with an extension contract. I mean, like we could have a nconcat extension contract method that did this? No, because contract calls are like public functions from a contract are not variadic. Like they have fixed arguments. Okay. They also can't be like generic in a type or something. That's true. I'd forgotten that. Okay, and then that's, I guess, off the table. We'll have to find some other way around this if it becomes a problem.
If that's the case, then does that also eliminate from consideration the notion of doing some sort of buffer comparison or buffer ordering, like string comparison or memory comparison?
No, not necessarily. I mean, if you have like a function that just takes two buffers and compares them, right?
But the length have to be bound though.
Yeah, but you can just make a max length.
That's true. Do we want to? Sorry. Does this also then affect slice and split? I guess you have to just take the max length. I think it's like a megabyte or something like that, and say just ask max length for both of those
Yeah.
two.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. As long as these things work, like, is there any other functions I'm missing here? Or, I mean, I'm not dead set on using these particular names. I'm just trying to describe the functionality I'm hoping we can build. But does these all sound reasonable? Are there things that we can take away, things that we can add?
They sound reasonable to me.
All right. If anyone has any more things to add or ways to remove some of these, just feel free to add them here or add them as GitHub issues. And speaking of the only remaining things for Clarity APIs are fix principle of, which is broken right now. I'm on the fence for native Bitcoin transaction parsing in Merkle-Proofs because you can do this in Clarity. And the challenge here would be to make this work with SegWit transactions if it is the case that we want to support this natively. Or just say like, hey, the native version doesn't support SegWit, deal with it. I don't know. This might be a candidate for doing in Clarity and then doing a cost vote to make it cheaper.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we have some of these like buffer operations, like some of this is easier anyways, right?
All right, I'm just gonna cross this off then. We can come back and revisit it, but yeah, like if we can find a way to not have to do this, just to eliminate work. Cool. And finally, the final work stream is reliability improvements. A couple of these are pretty small. One of which is like a one-line fix for the min of mean and median for the mining commit window. The trick for both of these, the other small one is making it so that you can, we add a new auth mode for transactions that let you sign in arbitrary orders instead of a fixed order, which is what's the case right now with the multi-sig signing mode. The trick in both cases, though, is to make sure that the logic, this new logic only becomes available once the epoch activates. So just taking off the soft fork logic here, this is the epoch activation dependency. Aaron, do you think this middle one here is a small or a large? I'm sorry, I'm not a small or large, but a small or a medium for tolerating empty sortitions in the prepare phase?
I would say small.
Okay. Yeah, that's overestimating a bit. And accurate runtime costs. I know that we were supposed to have a meeting about this sometime soon. If you can do it async, that's great too. The biggest thing here, I think, and the reason why I have this as a large is because it will probably require lots and lots of testing, like lots of benchmarking. Aaron, I haven't read the document that you shared with me recently about doing a cost assessment, but do you think that that would de-risk this to a medium, or how do you all feel about this? I see that we have Reed and Pavithra volunteering for this too.
I think this is still a large, like it's going to require a ton of testing. Yeah.
Alrighty. Are there any general questions, comments, concerns about the work streams here? I know it's still kind of coarse grained, so feel free to refine them down into issues on GitHub.
Jude, there's kind of a question I had. I asked it in Discord the other day. One thing I would like to see is something like a block notify feature that Bitcoin has. Is that on the horizon at all? Or is it
Yeah, we
something
can
that I
add
could
that.
just take and work on my own and do a PR?
Yeah, you can add that without 2.1. We
Yeah.
would need it.
Yeah, this is more of just a generic question about having like a block notify feature.
We kind of have that with the event stream. Sorry, with the
Yes,
not the event
I-
stream, but the
Yeah, I
notify.
did look at that code. It's similar to what I want, but I want it to work more like Bitcoin does, where you could fork a process on a block notify. Um, you know, something like that.
Yeah, you could totally do that. I guess like the fastest way to get something like this, that would be to make it so that the event note, you basically have like an event notifying shim, where it receives the event that a new block has arrived, and then it in turn takes care of forking. You could write that
Yeah.
in like a shell script or in Python or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. My question is more of would this conflict with any work that anyone else is doing before I start looking into it?
I don't think so. I think that we're all occupied on other things, so feel free.
Excellent. All right. I may take a look. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a question. So in this document, we are only tracking the Stacks 2.1 work streams. Like, do you think that we have other work streams in Stacks 2.0 that we should be tracking? Like for instance, 1805.
So,
Like-
for example, which?
1805. 1805. So
That's the POX forks.
yeah.
Oh, yes, yes. That I'm conflicted on this. We could do that through a soft fork, or we could do it as part of the 2.1 upgrade. The gist of it is that we'll want to make it so that the block commit that receives the most Bitcoin, as well as meets the F times W threshold for becoming the POX anchor block. We just need to make it so that the block commit with both of those properties is always the anchor block, or is always treated as the anchor block. So this is almost always the case right now, but it is possible that this could create a false positive, because there could be, for example, contention for an anchor block, or there could be somebody who intentionally burns Bitcoin in a bid to trick the system into thinking that an invalid block commit or a block commit that didn't win sortition is the anchor block commit. In either of those cases, the system should treat the anchor block as missing, even if the current logic would identify a separate block as the anchor block. I'm happy to just add this down here. It's probably the least risky of these things because we can always do it as a soft fork. Sorry. This is currently tracked as 1805. Thanks for bringing that up. Like, I'm going to try to do this as part of this upgrade. If we don't get to it, then we'll just do it as a soft fork after 2.1. Are there other issues?
Jude, I don't have an issue or anything to report, but the question coming from like downstream integrators. Do you think there should be any specific behavior, and this is probably for the group, for stacking? For instance, in the wallet, people are now considering trying to figure out how the block height would impact people who stack beyond the block height of Stacks 2.1, and if there's any like special case we need to deal with. Are there any thoughts around that?
I'm not quite sure I
Should we-
understand the question. Are you
For-
beyond the
For
block?
instance, should we be okay allowing people to just stack beyond the block height for stacks 2.1, or should we try to potentially have them complete stacking before the block height comes?
I don't know what you mean by stack beyond the block height.
If you do a lockup today for like 12 cycles,
Right.
that actually puts you beyond block 700,000.
Oh, I mean, that's going to be true no matter what we do. We're going to have to find
Yes.
those people over.
Yeah. So I think in answer to your question, Alex, like the plan is that any state that exists in 2.0 for stacking will be migrated during 2.1, and it'll be migrated in kind of like a behavior preserving way, so that if you're stacking through this block height, like as far as you're concerned, like things are just sort of seamlessly continuing along.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
And is there maybe some, I guess, some advantage to people to complete stacking before that block height comes? Because, you know, they could make use of continuous stacking and unlocks and all of that.
I don't think that we're able to answer this question
Just yet? Okay.
just yet. The intention is certainly that there wouldn't be any advantage. That like anybody who is like stacking through that block height, like when the migration happens, they have the same set of features as people that sort of start stacking anew afterwards. So
Okay, got it. Thank you. Answers my question.
We have just under 10 minutes left. So open the floor to discussions for anything related to the blockchain engineering, including the 2.1 work streams. Well, if there's nothing, then we can just go ahead and adjourn then. I see this one chat item here. Oh, RC4 is tagged. Stop sharing. Everyone know what they're doing this week?
Yep.
Cool. Gonna stop recording.